How are you, John?
I'm good, Amy. How are you?
Good. It feels like a long time since I've seen you at a weigh-in. Was it like last week?
I know. I left my Padres shirt in the other room, but I didn't know if my Belichick shirt would offend you at all. So,
No, I guess that's okay. I'll let that one slide.
uh,
I'm not a big football person, so
all
I
right,
I
okay,
can let
all
the football royalties.
right.
So I mean, I wanted to first talk about this contest because it sounds like a huge prize. I mean, I wish I could enter and win it because it's crazy. Like, can you kind of explain like what the prize is and how people can enter?
So it's incredible. I had to double check with Modelo to make sure that this is what they were actually putting on paper. I don't have to tell you about Modelo's longstanding relationship with the UFC, the official beer of the UFC. You've heard me say brewed for those with a fighting spirit a million times. So obviously, when this came down my pipe, I was very honored to be included. But floor seats to 10 pay-per-views a year. It's essentially like a Super Bowl grand sweepstakes times 10. So I wanted to make sure, wait a second, this isn't just like two floor seats for International Fight Week and then a bunch of behind the scenes stuff. You're essentially going to probably 15 championship fights over the course of a calendar year. If you probably say five of those are going to be championship double headers, and then all sorts of different behind the scenes stuff that candidly we've never offered to our fan base before. So it's the golden ticket. I mean, any Willy Wonka fan out there that's going to resonate with, but this is truly the golden ticket for any sports or UFC fan. And I'm really excited to get to know these people sort of intimately over the year as they spend time with me on the road and several others, that are part of this UFC machine.
Yeah, it's crazy because like you said, like you had to double check. I was reading the email like five times. I'm like, this can't be right. This is a great prize. But not just I mean, obviously the fights are great, but being able to kind of spend time with you, which is, I mean, even just if you're talking about like a fan or a person in media or somebody who wants to get into the sport, there's so many different angles that somebody could benefit from just hanging out with you for even 10 minutes, let alone like what 10, 15 times. That's cool. I mean, you mentioned like getting to know somebody intimately. What sort of person do you hope wins this? Do you hope it's somebody who's like a diehard fan, or do you hope it's somebody who maybe has never been to a fight before?
I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. And my twin brother loves to joke. He's like, they get to hang out with you. That's some sort of prize. But for me, it would be really cool if it had been somebody who has never been to a UFC live event before. I remember the first time I went to an MMA event in Tunica, Mississippi in 2007. I didn't know what the hell I was walking into. When I walked out, my life had effectively been changed forever. So part of me hopes that it's somebody that hasn't sat on the floor for a million UFC events before. But I would also say to the avid hardcore fans that have spent, thousands of dollars over the years supporting this sport, what better way to reward their skill with the opportunity of a lifetime? So I'm excited to be able to have these people in my hotel room as I'm doing voiceovers that they're going to hear in the arena later that week, for them to sort of see procedurally how I get to fight night. I think a lot of people feel like play-by-play announcers, and I know but I feel like a lot of people feel like we just kind of show up and talk. And, when two fighters are about to fight and you see them in the locker room, that I'm just winging it. And I think for a lot of our fans, it'll be interesting to see sort of the behind the scenes and how these shows come together. Because every one of them is pretty exhaustive. And hopefully the fan, whoever it is that wins this, will enjoy seeing that part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned there's so much that goes into the preparation of doing what you do. And I think about it and I think of all the jobs in the UFC. I think I would rather get in and fight somebody for 15 minutes than have your job, because it's like nightmare inducing to me to have to think about, because that stuff's going to live forever. Has there ever been a moment where you thought like, I can't do this?
Well, I don't know that I allowed that much doubt to creep in, but you're right. And you hit on an inconvenient truth. I think for a lot of broadcasters, you're judged by every utterance over 8 hours. And as soon as it's out there for the world to see and hear forever. And I've never had a perfect show. You can't take anything back. And certainly there have been dozens of times where I would like to verbally have said something in a different way, and you don't get a chance to redo it. And then if the action dictates you go somewhere else, you might have to bail on what is a very sensitive story. There have been times where I've called a knockout for the wrong guy. I mean, certainly there have been a lot of forgettable utterances over the course of 10 years on a UFC microphone. But I don't take myself too seriously. And For me, the anxiety, as I've told you before, is in the preparation more so than the performance. So once the prep is done and the hay is in the barn, there's only so much that I can do, right? There's only so much that I can control on fight night. And the thing that I can control the most is the preparation. I think one thing fans don't realize that you realize is that when we lose a fight, and then all of a sudden there are wholesale like bout order changes, there are major like format ramifications that have nothing to do with fighting. So we may lose a fight, and that might be 90 minutes more of work for me that night. So this is the devil I know at this point in time, but yeah, there's nothing easy about it.
Maybe you can kind of let somebody know who hasn't been to a fight, or even has been but hasn't been as close as you and I get to get. What's something that maybe the winner of this can expect to experience during a live event?
It's a great question. I think part of what they'll experience actually has nothing to do with the action. All the sights and sounds that accompany being on the floor for a UFC live event with ex-presidents walking by and different celebrities. So there's a lot to see. My brother often says when he sits on the floor, he watches fighting less than when he's sitting up in the bleeds, So there's a lot to see. But in terms of the fighting itself, the sights and the sounds of our sport are like nothing else. And when you see two heavyweights go in there and you're that close, there's just something indescribable that starts to sort of bubble in the belly. You feel the tension, even if you don't have a dog in the fight, even if you're not competing. There's something very visceral about our sport. And I think when you see it live in person, most people are addicted. And I think whomever ends up winning this grand prize from Modelo, they're going to be a fan for life if they're not already before.
Absolutely. I want to ask you a couple questions about some cards coming up. We obviously have Sean Strickland coming up this weekend, and he is a character. I guess that's the nicest way to say it. As somebody who, works on the mic, and we just discussed like saying things, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have said that. Or when you have somebody like that is making his kind of way based off shock value, how do you hand that person a mic and say, here you go on national television? I mean, how do you kind of steer that person towards being safe?
Well, I remember when Craig Borsari hired me in 2011, and I was charged with doing the post-fight interviews from my first broadcast with them, which was January 20th, 2012. And he looked at me and said, whatever you do, I don't care if it's Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, anybody, you cannot give up the microphone. Whatever the F you do, they can't hold the microphone. I've only given up the microphone one time, I believe, in 10 years. And it was when Mark Munoz retired in the Philippines. I felt like he deserved the mic in that moment. And I felt like he was going to have the respect to give it back to me. But yes, as a broadcaster, once you give an athlete the microphone, you have given up control of the entire broadcast. Certainly, Sean Strickland is a wild card, and I think it's up to any interviewer to try to steer that back, especially if the dump button is being hit every other minute, because then the audience at home isn't getting anything promotionally of what he's even trying to accomplish. But it's interesting because he kind of was under the radar for a long time, and he had this shiny record like 17-2, and he would beat everybody who he fought. Maybe didn't always do it with style points, but you kept wondering, who is this guy? And every time, they would bring somebody up to fight Sean Strickland, he would always beat that fighter. And now he's got the shine. Now he's got the rub. Now he is able to be himself kind of without ramification. And I guess in a long-winded way, I would say a lot of us in the public eye feel perpetually misunderstood. If you listen to me on my podcast, that's a completely different dude than you see buttoned up in a suit on a UFC telecast. And I think for Sean, it's very liberating to work for somebody like Dana White, to be able to be himself. Now, you kind of got to walk up to the line and not cross it. And some people would argue that he has crossed the line already. But big picture, he's a hell of a fighter, and not enough is being made of that. Hopefully this Saturday night, after the fact, they'll be talking about his performance, because when he's on, he looks like a future world champion. But oftentimes we're talking about the other things that accompany the whole Sean Strickland package.
And how do you think that fight with Jack Hermansson's going to go this weekend?
I think it's going to be interesting. I think Jack Hermansson is going to try to grapple. Obviously, it's a 25-foot octagon at the apex, and I do think that largely that rewards the grappler, because there's not a lot of room on the outside to work your footwork, to work your athletic gifts. I think that they both have that nastiness. They both have that mean streak. I think it could be an absolute bloodbath. I do think Strickland deserves the distinction as the favorite just because of his current form. But Jack Hermansson, I think has fought the better strength of schedule, albeit slightly. And, you know, I'm not surprised that some people see him as a live underdog, just given all that he's put forth. And I think Hermansson's got to be at the height of motivation. But man, I think it's going to take a near perfect effort out of him, especially when it comes to the transitions on the ground. If he's going to, you know, keep Sean there, run clock, and win the fight.
I got one last question for you. Hopefully it's a fun one. You know, there's fans are always kind of, you know, ripping on those sportscasters that come in from other sports and try and talk about MMA. But I'm wondering if there's somebody that you see in another sport you think would make a really good transition into MMA sportscasting.
It's a great question. You know, in a general way, I would say I'm impressed with how much young talent there is, particularly when it comes to some of these ring announcers. You know, I really think that they have all tried to do it in their own way and really can bring it. You know, I'd love to see the UFC bring in a black play-by-play guy. I think it's overdue. There aren't nearly enough black play-by-play guys in the world. You know, I thought Gus Johnson was great back in the day. You know, I don't know if he still has an appetite for doing mixed martial arts. But I just think there's a lot of young talent. And while a lot of those names are escaping me right now, you know, I'd like to see those guys get an opportunity. And I've also said too, like, ego ain't going to keep me around, Amy. Of that, I can assure you. Like, if I won the lottery, I would honor my contract and probably ride off into the sunset so somebody else could take the seat. You know, I'm oftentimes the older man in the room now, believe it or not, at 43 years of age. You know, Ray Flores, I guess, is one name I can give you. He's been a guy who has worked a lot as a ring announcer and a master of ceremonies. But I think he can do it all. I love his voice, and I hope he's a part of the UFC at some point in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And I can't wait to see who wins this contest, because I'm sure I'll see them around as well.
I appreciate your time. Good to see you.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.